The sky over Miami that late afternoon seemed to cry along with him. Thick clouds hid the sun, casting long shadows through the hospital windows. Matthew, only 15 years old, held his mother's hand as if she could still feel it. As if somehow the warmth of his fingers could keep her there for just one more moment. The room was too white, too cold. The heart monitor had fallen silent a few minutes ago, but the echo of the last beat still echoed inside him, like a dull blow, a thunder without rain. He couldn't cry. Not yet. His heart seemed stuck somewhere between shock and denial. "She's gone, son," said a low voice behind him. It was his father, Edward. Matthew didn't answer, didn't look. He just kept staring at the peaceful face of the woman who had taught him how to tie his shoes, to draw hearts on the edges of his notebooks, and to always say thank you, even when it hurt. Anna had been his fortress. Since he was a little boy, his mother wrapped him in tenderness, always present at soccer practices, during midnight fevers, during childhood nightmares. She smiled even when she was tired, hid the pain of dialysis sessions behind flowered scarves and pink lipstick. Now everything was quiet. In the days that followed, the house in Coral Gables became a capsule of silence. The furniture remained in the same place, the cookbook still in the kitchen, her perfume clinging to the sheets. But she was no longer there. And Edward changed. From a smiling man who danced to jazz with Anna on Sundays, he became a shadow. He spent hours locked in his office, drinking in silence. He answered his son's questions with a dry yes or no. Sometimes, not even that. Matthew tried to get close, but he ran into an invisible wall of grief. His father didn't blame him, not explicitly, but there was an unspoken pain between them, like a crack that grew over time. A pain that said, "I can't move on and you remind me of her." One rainy night, months later, Matthew went downstairs and found his father sitting on the couch, holding a glass of whiskey, his eyes lost on the turned-off television. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked carefully. Edward slowly turned his face. His eyes were red, his beard unshaven. "She's gone, Matthew, and she took everything with her." Matthew swallowed hard. "She would never want to see you like this," he said. "You don't understand," his father murmured. Looking away, Matthew climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. In his room, he looked at the photo of the three of them taken at a picnic in Matheson Hammock Park. The sun was shining on his mother's face. That image seemed from another world. 7 years passed. Matthew was now 22. Strong, tall, his dark hair cut short, brown eyes always watchful. He was a grown man, but the emptiness in his chest remained the same. The house remained silent. The hallways still held memories, but there were no more hugs, no laughter. Only dusty photos and the sound of his father's footsteps moving from the office to the kitchen and back. Matthew got up early every day to run. That was his ritual. He put on his headphones, ran through the streets of Miami, felt the wind on his face, and for a few minutes, forgot the pain. But it wasn't enough anymore. Soccer had been his passion since childhood. He trained alone, played in amateur leagues, drew attention. Boston University had offered him a sports scholarship months before, an opportunity many would kill for. He hesitated to accept, not out of fear, but out of attachment to what remained of his mother in that house. But as the days passed, he felt more and more that it was no longer possible to live trapped in memory. On a hot September morning, he made his decision. In the kitchen, his father drank coffee without sugar, eyes fixed on the newspaper. "I'm going to Boston," Matthew said bluntly. Edward raised his eyes slowly. "When?" "Next week. I've confirmed enrollment. The scholarship covers everything." The silence between them was thick. His father looked out the window, then back at his cup. "So that's it," he murmured. Matthew waited for more. Encouragement. And "I'm proud of you." Anything, but nothing came. "I can't stand living in this house anymore, Dad. She's everywhere. In the smell of the food, the way the curtains hang. I miss her all the time, and you shut yourself away." I tried to reach out, but you won't let me. You think I didn't suffer?" Edward stood up suddenly, his eyes filled with barely contained tears. "She was the love of my life, Matthew. And you're still here walking around this house like everything can go back to how it was." Matthew felt the impact like a punch to the gut. "I don't want it to go back, Dad. I just wanted you to be here with me." "I lost her too." For a moment, the two stared at each other, two broken men, trying to find words in the rubble of pain. Edward took a deep breath and sat down again. "Boston might be good for you," he said at last. "Go, before this house swallows you." "Two." Matthew nodded, his eyes brimming. The following week, the bags were packed. The goodbye was brief. A handshake, a long look. "Take care, son." "You too, Dad." In the taxi on the way to the airport, Matthew looked out the window and saw the palm tree in the yard swaying in the wind. He remembered when his mother used to hang colorful lanterns on it for birthday parties. He felt a lump in his throat, but he didn't look back. Boston awaited him. And with it, a new chance to breathe, to live without the walls of absence, to honor his mother's memory, not with sadness, but with courage. The air in Boston felt different, colder, more somber. The leaves on the trees danced in the wind as Matthew stepped out of the taxi with his bags in hand and an uncertain future before him. At 22, he was leaving behind not just a city, but a history marked by pain, silences, and longing. But in Boston, everything felt new. As if every street was inviting him to start over, it was there, between the university corridors and the exhausting practices. But he met Claire. She was the same age as him, with lively eyes and a wide smile. There was a lightness in her that contrasted with the heavy burdens Matthew carried in his chest. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked one day after a practice, as he drank water leaning against the fence. "I am. I'm from Miami. I'm Matthew," he replied, extending his hand. "Claire, and welcome." Boston might be cold, but it has a funny way of embracing those who need to start over. From that day, they began to grow closer. Shared lunches, talks about music, movies, and over time, dreams and scars. Soon after, they decided to share a small apartment with a cramped kitchen, but large windows that let the light in. Life was starting to find its rhythm. Matthew was accepted into the Boston Titans, the university's football team. And there, on the frozen fields of the North, his talent as a quarterback shone. Precise throws, quick reads, courage. He was admired by his teammates, respected by the coaches, and adored by the fans. Matthew's career was taking off. 8 years passed. At 30, Matthew was already a well-established name in the professional league. Wearing the Boston Titans jersey, he stood out as one of the most promising quarterbacks of the season. The team was about to play in the national championship semifinal, and he was the key player. The spotlight was on him, and everything seemed to be leading to the pinnacle of success. But fate, once again, decided to test his strength in the semifinal. Under the bright lights and the cheers of the crowd, Matthew commanded the game with mastery. The score was tight, the pressure intense. He received the snap, ran to escape the defense, when an opponent came in with reckless force and hit him squarely in the back. At the same time, a violent ball came in the same direction. The impact was brutal. The stadium went silent. Matthew dropped to his knees, then to the ground. He couldn't get up. The pain was unbearable, hot and sharp. He was carried off the field on a stretcher, hands trembling and heart racing, not because of the game, but because of the fear. At the hospital, the exams began, many of them. CT scans, MRIs, blood tests. Claire was by his side the entire time, holding his hand, making jokes to hide the panic in her eyes. Days later, the doctor entered the room with a serious expression. "Matthew, your kidneys have suffered severe damage." More than we expected. Matthew furrowed his brow. "But with rest, anti-inflammatories, I'll recover, right?" The doctor hesitated. "We'll do everything we can." But even with treatment, the progress hasn't been positive. 2 months passed. Appointments, strict diets, medications. But nothing seemed to be enough. In the new consultation, the doctor looked him in the eyes and went straight to the point. "Matthew, I'm sorry, but you'll need to start dialysis." Every day, the world stopped. The sound of the room disappeared. Claire let out a shaky sigh. Matthew stared into the emptiness for a few seconds. As if he were in another time dot at that moment, a film played in his mind. He was 15 again, sitting next to his mother's bed. He remembered the needles, the machines, the exhaustion in her eyes. How she tried to smile, even when she was drained, and then the pain of losing her. Now it was him, the same fate, the same battle. The fear was different from anything he had ever faced on the field. Claire approached, her eyes filled with tears. "Matt, you're not alone. We'll get through this together." But he couldn't respond. He just closed his eyes and let the tears fall. He was no longer the invincible quarterback. He wasn't the dreamer who had run away from the pain in Miami. He was a man, broken once again, facing a future that no one can predict, and it was just the beginning of a third journey. Off the field, life felt like something else. It had been a year since the accident, a year since Matthew had felt the impact that would change everything. Now his routine was marked by doctor's appointments, strict diets, and long dialysis sessions. The sports uniform had been replaced by loose, comfortable clothes, and the applause by an oppressive silence. Boston remained the same cold, beautiful, full of life, but he no longer felt part of that scenery. The streets seemed longer, the cafes emptier, the mornings grayer. Claire, the woman who once brought him light, was starting to drift away. At first, she went with him to the sessions, prepared meals, came up with silly games to distract him from the pain, but over time her gaze changed. Her words became shorter, the silences longer, until one afternoon, after another exhausting session, she waited for him to lie down on the couch and spoke, her voice low but firm. "Matt, I can't do this anymore." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I love you, but I don't know how to handle this." Not the fear, the changes, the routine. Not the possibility of losing you. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment. The pain he felt in his body seemed small compared to what was settling in his chest. "So you're leaving me?" Claire was crying. "I don't know if I'm strong enough. I wish I were, but I'm not." She stood up, grabbed her purse, and without saying another word, walked out. The apartment stayed silent for long minutes. Then Matthew slowly got up, walked to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and stared at the mirror. The invincible football player was gone. In his place was a tired man, thin, pale. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly alone. A few days later, at the hospital, while the sound of the machines filled the white, cold room of the clinic, Matthew looked at the ceiling and broke down. "I can't do this anymore." The doctor, a middle-aged man with a calm voice and experienced eyes, sat beside the chair where Matthew was connected to the dialysis machine. "Matthew, we're doing everything we can." "It's not enough," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I wake up every day afraid. I leave here nauseous, weak, dizzy. I lost my career. I lost my girlfriend. Is this still a life?" The doctor took a deep breath. "There is a way out, but it's not simple." Matthew raised his eyes, cautiously hopeful. "A transplant." The words hit like a punch. Deep down, he knew this moment would come. But hearing the confirmation felt like reliving it all over again. "The hospital, the mother, the end, a transplant," he repeated, almost in a whisper. "We need to find a compatible donor. Someone from your family." Matthew shook his head. "I don't have siblings." "What about your parents?" "My mother passed away." "My father," he hesitated. "We haven't spoken in years." Even so, he decided to try. He reached out to his maternal aunt, a woman with a sweet voice and quick gestures. She didn't hesitate. Took the first flight to Boston with her 2 teenage sons, Matthew's only cousins. They went straight to the hospital, took the tests. Days later, the results arrived. Incompatible. The last option was his father. Matthew took a deep breath and decided to go see him. The trip to Miami felt strange. The city's heat contrasted with the coldness of the mission. In the rental car, he recognized the streets of his childhood, the tall palm trees, the distant sound of waves breaking on the shore. Every corner brought back a memory of his mother's laughter, the smell of food, afternoons watching the sunset. But what he felt now was emptiness. His father received him with a neutral expression at the gate of a house that looked the same as always, but with more bars, less color. Matthew, he said, emotionless. Hi, Dad. They went inside. His father led him to the living room, where the air conditioning chilled the space and the sound of the television filled the uncomfortable silence. I thought I'd never hear from you again, the father finally said. I wouldn't have come if it weren't urgent. The father looked at him for a moment. I figured. You only came because of this, didn't you? I need a transplant. A kidney. The man looked down. His hair was thinner, but his features remained firm. He looked older than he really was, and you want me to take the test. It's my only chance. There was a long silence. I'll do it, he finally said. Despite everything, you're still my son. The test was scheduled for 2 days later. Matthew returned to the hotel and spent the following hours torn between anxiety and hope. For a moment, he imagined his father holding his hand in a hospital room like his mother used to. But it was just fantasy. The exam confirmed. The father was compatible. Matthew cried, relieved. But what came next was even more painful. His father asked to meet at the hospital. He arrived looking worn out, avoiding eye contact. I've thought a lot about all this. Matthew felt a chill. And I'm not going to go through with the donation. The words hit like a punch. What? Matthew, I lost your mother. And I nearly went insane. I can't go through that again. I know it sounds like cowardice, and maybe it is. But I just can single quotes. Matthew stood up, trembling. You're my father. And that's exactly why I'm leaving. Because I love you. In my own messed up way, maybe. But if I see you on an operating table and something goes wrong, I won't survive it. Matthew didn't answer. He just watched his father walk out of the room, cross the hallway, and disappear through the door. There was no hug, no goodbye. That night, lying in the hospital room, he stared at the ceiling again. The tears fell silently. He was back to square one, alone, lost, but still breathing. And maybe that was still a way to keep going. The late afternoon in Miami was humid, with a warm breeze coming from the ocean, carrying the salty scent of the sea spray. The clouds hung heavy in the sky like thoughts that wouldn't dissipate, perhaps foreshadowing one of those quick showers. The city knows so well. Matthew wandered aimlessly through the streets that had once been part of his childhood. The sidewalks still seemed the same, the tall lampposts, the corner store, the school wall that now appeared smaller. Dragging along leaves and memories Matthew wished to forget. He walked without direction, hands in his pockets, and gaze lost. There was nothing left holding him there. No football, no love, no father. Gradually, his steps led him to a familiar neighborhood. Before he realized it, he was standing in front of the old house where he had grown up with his parents. The facade, now worn by time, still carried echoes of laughter, arguments, sleepless nights. Matthew stopped before the weathered wooden gate. The garden was overgrown with tall weeds, and the closed windows revealed an abandonment similar to what he felt inside himself. He rested his forehead against the wooden door, as if hoping to hear his mother's voice saying dinner was ready, or his father calling him to watch a game on television. But there was only silence. Then he turned and walked toward the sea. The beach was nearly deserted. The waves crashed strong and violent, as if reflecting the fury roaring within him. The sky began to darken, tinting the horizon with shades of blue and purple. Matthew sat on the sand, knees bent and arms wrapped around his legs. He watched the ebb and flow of the ocean with dull eyes. The words echoed in his mind. I can't do this. I can't lose you too. His father had given up. Claire had left him. Football, which had always been his refuge and identity, was now just a distant memory. Hemodialysis consumed his days, his energy, his hope. He lowered his head. "There's nothing left here for me," he murmured to himself, his voice swallowed by the sound of the sea. When night had fully fallen, and the streetlights along the shore lit up with a yellowish glow, Matthew slowly stood up. He took off his shoes, left them beside a rock, and walked step by step toward the water. The waves were more aggressive, the wind cooler. Each step forward was a silent scream. The water rose to his knees, then to his waist. The cold salt stung his skin like tiny needles, but he didn't retreat. When the first wave knocked him down, Matthew didn't try to resist. At that same moment, not far away, Brenda was walking along the sand with Doan, her golden retriever. She had just finished her shift at the hospital, and as she did every night, to clear her mind, strolled with her dog to unwind. She wore her jacket zipped up to her neck, her brown hair tied in a messy bun, and her boots sinking slightly into the sand, dampened by the earlier rain. Doan suddenly barked, pulling the leash toward the sea. "Easy, boy," she said, frowning. "What's wrong?" Then she saw it, a silhouette in the middle of the waves, being carried by the current. Her heart raced. "Doan, someone's drowning. Let's go." Without a second thought, Brenda ran toward the water, shedding her jacket along the way. The sea was cold, turbulent, but she didn't hesitate. Doan went in with her, swimming strongly beside his owner. The waves crashed against her, making movement difficult, but the figure was still there, floating inert. Brenda reached Matthew, who was already unconscious. With Dawn's help, she managed to pull him to the shallow part and then out of the water. Panting, she knelt beside him on the sand. "Hey, sir," she shouted. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. No response. She began resuscitation maneuvers, pressing Matthew's chest with firm hands. Doan barked incessantly, as if calling for help. After several interminable seconds, Matthew coughed up water and gasped for air, breathing again. Brenda smiled in relief. "Thank God." She took her phone from her jacket pocket lying on the sand and called emergency services. "Hello? This is Brenda Jones, nurse at General Hospital. I found a man drowning at Revere Beach. He's conscious now, but needs urgent care. We're on the south part of the beach, near the wooden deck. Please send an ambulance." While waiting, she removed Matthew's wet shirt, covering him with her jacket. He was shivering, his eyes barely able to stay open. "You're safe now," she said softly. "They're coming to get you." Matthew looked at her, confused, his voice hoarse. "Why did you help me?" Brenda smiled slightly, her eyes brimming with tears, "Because life has already taken too much from me. And I won't let it take you too." When the red and blue lights of the ambulance approached, Matthew's heart was still weak, but it was beating, and although everything seemed lost, for the first time in a long while, there was a spark there. A breath of life. Brenda held his hand until the paramedics placed him on the stretcher. And even without knowing this man's name, she felt, deep in her heart, that their destinies were about to intertwine. The soft morning light filtered through the white hospital blinds, bathing the room in a pale golden hue. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically, and the gentle whisper of the oxygen filled the silence with a comforting sound. Matthew slowly woke up, his eyes blinking against the diffused light. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The white ceiling, the antiseptic smell, the soft footsteps in the hallways. He turned his head with difficulty and saw, sitting beside him, a woman with calm eyes and a gentle expression. "Brenda, where?" he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. Brenda leaned closer, placing one hand over his, gentle but firm. "Don't try to speak now, Matthew. You're safe, but you need to rest." His eyes widened briefly when he heard his name. She knew who he was. "How? We'll talk later, I promise." "But now," she said, taking a syringe from the pocket of her coat, "you need sleep. Your body's been through a lot." Before he could protest, she administered the sedative into his fore with skill and care. "Trust me," she whispered as his eyes slowly closed. "You're in good hands. and he slept deeply, like someone who, for the first time in a long while, felt safe. The next morning, Brenda passed by the ward before starting her shift. She wore her coat over a light blue blouse, and her hair was tied in a loose bun. She carried a coffee cup and Matthew's medical chart in her hands. When she opened the door to his room, she found him awake, sitting against the pillow, his eyes fixed on the window. "Good morning," she said with a soft smile. "How are you feeling?" Matthew slowly turned his face toward her. His gaze was dull, lifeless, tired. Empty. She approached and sat in the chair beside the bed. "I imagine you're confused. I wanted to talk to you." "Explain what happened." He nodded silently. "You were found on the beach last night. You were unconscious, nearly drowning. I was walking my dog down and, well, I saw you." I dove in without thinking twice. It was close. Matthew lowered his gaze, a knot forming in his chest. "So, it was you who saved me." "It was," she replied simply. "But I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it because sometimes life puts us in the right place at the right time. Maybe because you still have something left to live for." He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. "I didn't want to be saved. I just wanted it all to be over." I couldn't see a way out anymore. Brenda gently squeezed his hand. "Now you have a second chance." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Matthew's doctor entered, a middle-aged man with thin glasses and a spotless white coat. He held a tablet in his hands and wore a serious expression. "Mr. Walsh, Brenda, may we talk for a moment?" "Of course," she replied, standing. "Matthew, your test results show a worsening of your kidney condition. Your attempt to leave this world, along with the physical stress and cold exposure from the ocean, put a heavy strain on your body. You're very weak right now." Matthew sighed, as if each piece of news added more weight to his chest. "So, that's it?" "Not exactly, but I need to be clear. Returning to Boston now would be extremely risky. Your body couldn't handle a trip like that, not even with medical supervision. You need to continue your dialysis sessions here in Miami," the doctor explained. "But my treatment, my life is there. Your life, Matthew, is wherever you're alive. Let's make sure of that first. We have adequate resources here, and for that reason, I've taken the liberty of assigning Brenda as your primary nurse during your treatment. She already knows your case, and I believe that this closeness can help you through this moment." Matthew looked at Brenda. His eyes met hers, and she returned the gaze calmly. "Would you accept that?" He asked hesitantly. "Of course." She answered gently. "You won't go through this alone." The following days passed with a different rhythm. Far from the football field, the spotlights, and the hidden pain behind fame, Matthew was now just a man trying to survive. The first dialysis session was painful, not only physically, but emotionally. It was as if he were letting go of who he used to be, but Brenda was always there. She sat beside him during the sessions, brought books, or simply listened. They talked about music, old movies, their dogs. She told stories from the hospital, about patients who overcame the impossible. And little by little, Matthew's silences began to fill. They laughed. Sometimes they cried. But most importantly, they were there, present, friends, and among them were needles, wires, and monitors. Something delicate began to bloom. It wasn't love yet, but it was something close to hope. It was a quiet afternoon in Miami. The air was warm, scented with the sea breeze and the light fragrance of gardenias. Blooming in the small garden in front of the house, Brenda now shared with Matthew. The golden light of sunset streamed softly through the windows, painting everything in shades of honey and warmth. Matthew sat on the porch, a blanket over his knees and a closed book resting on his lap. He watched the sky in silence, but this time, his eyes no longer carried the same sadness as before. And then it happened. For the first time in 6 months. Since that night on the beach, his lips curved into a smile. Brenda, watching from the doorway, was surprised. It wasn't a forced smile. It wasn't one of courtesy. It was real, a smile that had waited far too long to return. That same evening, with the moon high over the city, Matthew turned to her and said, "Brenda, would you have dinner with me?" She smiled, amused. "We have dinner together. Every day." He gently shook his head. "No, I mean a real dinner, like a date." Brenda's heart skipped a beat. It had been years since she felt anything like this. "I'd love to." They chose a quiet restaurant by the marina, a small, candlelit place where the sound of waves hitting the boat docks mixed with the sun of the sea. Matthew, thinner, now and still pale, wore a simple dark shirt and tried to hide his nervousness behind a half smile. Brenda, elegant in a cream dress, looked at him with tenderness. Between bites of grilled salmon and sips of white wine, he told her everything. No filters, no shame. From his childhood in Miami, his father's silence, his mother's death, his rise in sports, and the slow, painful fall when his kidneys began to fail. He talked about that night on the beach, his despair, his surrender, and how waking up. To see her face changed everything. Brenda listened without interrupting. She didn't show pity. She honored his story with silence, tears in her eyes, and quiet affection. "There's one more thing I need to tell you," he said in a low voice. She looked up. "What I feel for you, it's not just gratitude. It's something else. Something that grows inside me every time you walk into a room, every time you hold my hand or look at me the way you do." Brenda smiled, moved. "I had forgotten what it felt like to feel this," she said. "But you made me remember." A year passed. Matthew decided to move permanently to Miami. He was happy. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. His relationship with Brenda grew stronger every day, built with care, respect, and a tenderness they both thought they had lost forever. But life sometimes waits for the sweetest moment to reveal its cruelest wounds. At a routine checkup, the doctor looked at the test results, and his expression changed. "Matthew, I'm sorry, but your kidney function has deteriorated drastically. Without a transplant, you have at most 2 months to live." Matthew was silent for several long seconds. Then he took a deep breath. "All right, I just want these 2 months to be the happiest of my life." That night, he told Brenda everything. She listened in shock, her eyes brimming with tears. The next day, without saying a word to him, she went to the hospital. Her heart was tight, but she was determined. She asked to be tested for compatibility. Hours later, the result. She was a match. Without hesitation, she signed the papers. She had decided to donate her kidney for his life, for the hope he had brought back into her heart. Leaving the hospital, she went straight home, ready to tell him the news. But when she opened the kitchen door, the ground vanished beneath her feet. "Matthew!" she cried, running toward him. He was lying on the floor, unconscious, his body cold, pale, as if time had stopped right there. Brenda quickly called the ambulance, her hands shaking, barely able to type the numbers on her phone. "Please, hurry, he's unconscious." Minutes later, sirens echoed through the streets. Matthew was rushed to the hospital. Brenda stood there, still holding her phone, her heart pounding, soul suspended, praying that he would survive. Once again, the silence in that cold hospital room was broken only by the steady beeping of the machines monitoring vital signs. The white light of the ICU made everything feel more real, more raw. Brenda, eyes red and heart heavy, searched urgently for the doctor. "Doctor, I did the test. I'm a match. I want to donate my kidney. Do the surgery today, now." The doctor looked at her, stunned. "Brenda, Matthew's condition is extremely fragile. He might not survive surgery in this state." She took a step forward, her voice firm but laced with emotion. "If you don't do it now, he won't survive. Please, do it now." The doctor hesitated for long seconds. The risks were immense, but time was even shorter. Finally, with a small nod, he said, "All right, let's prepare them immediately." The following hours were filled with absolute tension. Brenda was taken into the operating room with a peaceful heart, despite the fear. She knew she was doing the right thing. Matthew was also prepped, his life hanging by a thread, depending entirely on the decisions made in that room. The surgery lasted hours. The clock seemed frozen, and each minute stretched into eternity. When it finally ended, silence took over once more. Brenda and Matthew were taken to the ICU, side by side, intubated, monitored. Still deep in sleep. The next day, the first rays of sunlight timidly entered the ICU window. Brenda was the first to wake up. Her body ached, her stitches burned, but her soul longed for one thing: to see Matthew. She slowly turned her head and saw him, lying still, connected to multiple machines, breathing with difficulty. But he was there, alive. With a faint voice, she called out to a nurse, "Please, call the doctor." The doctor entered with calm steps, but his eyes were sharp. He smiled when he saw her awake. "The surgery was a success. You were incredible, Brenda." But she looked at him, already feeling her chest tighten. But what? His condition was very severe. He's still in a coma. The next few days will be critical. 15 days went by. Brenda was discharged, but she refused to go home. She asked every day to stay at the hospital, and even after being released, she returned daily. She cared for Matthew with moving tenderness. She cleaned his face, combed his hair, read to him, spoke about simple things, as if he could hear her. Time passed. The doctors said he might never wake up, but Brenda never gave up. Then, on a gray afternoon, exactly 2 months after the transplant, she was sitting by his bedside, holding his hand as always. She gently ran her fingers over his when she felt it, a slight movement, almost imperceptible. His finger had moved. She jumped to her feet. "Doctor, come quickly." He moved. The monitors began to show changes. The doctor rushed in, checked his vitals, and for the first time in weeks, smiled with hope. He's coming out of the coma. The following days required extreme care. Slowly, Matthew began to open his eyes. First, he blinked. Then he tried to move his lips. And finally, he murmured scattered words. Brenda never left his side. Until one clear morning, he opened his eyes completely. He blinked several times, looking around, confused. Brenda held his hand, overcome with emotion. "Matthew, you woke up. Everything's going to be okay now?" He looked at her, trying to focus. Then, with visible effort, he spoke. "Nurse, can you help me?" Brenda smiled, thinking it was just confusion from waking up. "Matthew, it's me, Brenda." But he frowned. "I'm sorry, I don't remember you." Brenda's world collapsed in that instant. She sat down slowly, feeling the ground disappear beneath her feet. Tears fell silently. She had saved him. She had loved him, and now he didn't remember anything. 6 months had passed since the day Matthew first opened his eyes after the coma. 6 months of rehabilitation, intensive care, and long silences. He was finally ready to be discharged. The doctors were optimistic about his physical recovery, but the amnesia still hung over him like a thick fog over his memories. Brenda was by his side that day. Her heart was full of joy to see him leave the hospital alive, but she also carried a hidden pain, the pain of loving in silence. She had given a part of herself to save him, but no one, except the doctors, knew about it. And by her order, it would remain that way before the discharge. She looked into the doctor's eyes and quietly asked, "Promise me you'll never tell him I was the donor, please." The doctor hesitated but respected her request. "All right, but why?" She just smiled sadly. "Because I want that. If he ever loves me again, it's for me, not out of gratitude." Brenda took Matthew to the house they lived in together before. Everything happened. To him, it was like entering a strange place. No furniture seemed familiar. No photographs stirred any emotion. The house that had once been filled with shared memories was now just an empty place in his mind. He walked slowly, looking around. This house, it's nice, but I don't remember anything. It feels like I've never been here. Brenda swallowed. the lump in her throat and smiled. "It's okay. The important thing is that you're here now. I'll help you with whatever you need." He nodded with gratitude, but with some distance. To him, Brenda was just the nurse who had been with him since the hospital. He had no idea that she was the love of his life. The days passed slowly. Matthew, although physically stronger, was emotionally cold and distant. Brenda took care of him with patience, hiding the pain of seeing him so near, and yet so far. A year after the surgery, on a sunny morning, they were sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast. Brenda had made the coffee just the way he liked it, even though he no longer remembered that Matthew stirred his cup absent-mindedly, until in a calm voice he said, "Brenda, I've decided that I'm going back to Boston." She stopped immediately. The spoon fell from her hand. Her heart raced. "Back to Boston?" He nodded. "Yes, I think I've recovered enough. I want to try playing football again. Start over. Here, I don't feel like I belong. I don't remember anything. Nothing makes sense." Brenda's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hold them back, but it was impossible. You're leaving? I'm sorry. I'm really grateful for everything you've done for me, truly. You've been amazing this whole time. But I need to move on with my life, find out who I was. Brenda tried to smile, but it was impossible. He continued, "Sometimes I think, who was the angel who saved my life? Who had such a generous soul to give me a second chance? One day, I need to find out who my donor was." His words pierced Brenda's chest. She looked into his eyes, her lips trembling, and for a moment she thought about telling him the truth, saying that it was her, that she loved him, that everything he was looking for was right in front of him. But seeing him, so determined, she remained silent. She didn't want him to stay out of pity, or out of obligation. "Maybe one day you'll find out," she said. Through stifled sobs in the following days, Matthew began planning his return. He searched for flights, old contacts, and clubs. He was excited, determined. And Brenda, day after day, just watched him, silently watching the man she loved leave, without knowing who she truly was. And so the day of his departure drew near, like an inevitable sentence. And with it, the weight of a love that was forgotten, but still true. The night before Matthew's departure to Boston was quiet. The cool sea breeze drifted softly through the air, and the house where he and Brenda had once shared memories felt emptier than ever. The clock ticked away the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Even though Matthew was excited to start over in Boston, something inside him felt incomplete. Brenda walked into his room with a calm expression, though her eyes betrayed a distant sadness. She approached Matthew, who was lying on the bed staring at the ceiling. "Tomorrow's the big day," she said with a forced smile. Matthew smiled back, though it lacked true joy. He still didn't know what to do with the confusion building inside him. "Yeah, but before I go, can I do one last thing?" he asked softly, his voice serious. Brenda raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to do?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with silent nostalgia. "I just want to see you one last time tonight, just you and me." Brenda smiled slightly, understanding the unspoken request. She stood and gave him a quick kiss on the forehead. "I'm going to the beach with Dawn. I need to clear my mind a bit, just a walk, nothing more." Matthew nodded, and without another word, she left. Half an hour later, as Matthew sat in the living room, an uncomfortable feeling crept over him. He looked around and noticed Brenda's phone lying on the table. He frowned, realizing she must have forgotten it. She might need it, and she hadn't noticed. Without thinking twice, he got up and decided to bring it to her. He had little time left before leaving for Boston in the morning, and returning the house keys to the owner as he stepped outside and crossed the street toward the beach, a strange sensation took over. A sharp, unusual headache hit him. Concerned, he slowed his pace, but he kept going. He took off his shoes and walked barefoot in the sand toward Brenda, who he saw sitting in the distance, staring at the sea with the dog beside her. And then, something extraordinary happened. The headache stopped. The strange feeling vanished. And suddenly, like a flash of lightning, his memory came rushing back, everything, all at once. It was as if a movie was playing in his mind, showing him every detail of his life, his story with Brenda, and every emotion he had buried deep inside. He remembered everything. Every smile, every touch, every kiss. When Matthew reached Brenda, all he could do was cry. The tears rolled down his face with a force stronger than any pain he had ever felt. He knelt in front of her, trembling. "Brenda, I remembered everything," he said, his voice broken, his chest tight. She looked at him confused, unsure of what was happening. "I remembered everything," he repeated, stronger now. "It was here where it all began. You saved my life that day. I didn't know how important you were to me. Please forgive me, my love. I'm so sorry for all the pain I caused you." Brenda was in shock. She didn't know what to say. What did he mean? She watched him in silence, waiting for an explanation. But her words got stuck in her throat. Matthew looked into her eyes, still full of tears, and said, "I know I hurt you. I know I caused you so much pain, but please forgive me. I love you. I love you with all my heart. You are the only person that matters in my life." Brenda, unable to hold back her own tears, threw herself into his arms. They embraced tightly, as if the world around them had disappeared. Brenda's dog, Doan, ran to them and jumped up in excitement, making them laugh between their tears. "I'll never leave you again, my love," Matthew said, still holding her, gazing at the horizon with a peace he hadn't felt in so long. "Never again, I love you." They sat on the sand, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sea. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed in tune with their heartbeats, as if the universe was finally aligning in their favor. Brenda's dog lay beside them, and the three stayed there in silence, savoring that moment of peace that had finally returned to their lives. The night wind carried the scent of the ocean, and as the stars sparkled above, Matthew and Brenda knew that no matter what the future held, nothing could ever separate them again. The sky over the beach was beginning to lighten. The dark blue of dawn gave way to soft, golden hues, painting the clouds like brushstrokes of hope. Still sitting on the sand, side by side, Brenda and Matthew watched the horizon as if they could find all the answers of the universe there. The sea was calm, and the breeze touched their faces gently, as if nature itself were silently blessing their reunion. Matthew, his gaze lost among the waves, broke the silence with a whisper filled with emotion. "The only thing I want now is to find out who my donor was. Who was the other angel who saved me a second time? Because you were the one who saved me first." Brenda sighed. Her chest tightened. Matthew's words echoed inside her with the weight of a decision she had postponed for far too long. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and said, her voice trembling, "I know who your donor was." Matthew turned to her, surprised. "You know, why didn't you tell me before? It's confidential, right? That's why you didn't say anything?" Brenda slowly shook her head. "No, that's not why, Matt." She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "It was for a much bigger reason." Matthew's heart raced. He reached out and held her hand. "Can you tell me?" A tear slid down Brenda's cheek. She smiled, tender and brave. "It was me, Matt. I'm the donor." Matthew was speechless. The world seemed to stop. The sound of the waves faded away. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. His eyes filled with tears, and he just stared at her, stunned. "My love," he finally whispered. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Brenda wiped away a falling tear and answered with a choked voice. "Because I didn't want you to stay with me out of gratitude. I did it out of love. As soon as I found out I was a match, I knew I'd do it without hesitation. But I wanted you to choose me freely with your heart, not out of debt." Matthew hugged her tightly, as if trying to shield her from the entire world. He cried, "I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done for me." You're the angel who saved my life twice." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "And I promise I'll spend every day of my life trying to get back that love. Brenda, will you marry me? Will you move to Boston with me and build a new life together?" Brenda brought her hands to her mouth, surprised, overwhelmed, unable to hold back her tears. "Yes, Matt, yes. That's all I want. To be by your side forever." They kissed right there with the ocean as their witness and Dome running around them in celebration. The sun was rising behind the clouds, lighting the way to their new beginning. The next morning, the two left the house where so much had happened. There was no sadness in their goodbye, only gratitude and hope. In Boston, a new home awaited them. Simple, but full of plans, laughter, and promises. With a lighter heart than ever, Brenda decided not to return to nursing. That chapter of her life had ended with dignity and love. Instead, she fulfilled an old dream. She opened a small flower shop in the heart of the city. A cozy space filled with the scent of lavender and jasmine where she created arrangements, as if telling stories through petals. There, she smiled at people, shared beauty, and let her soul bloom. Matthew, on the other hand, understood that his time on the field was over. Returning to professional football would be far too risky. But his love for the sport still pulsed within him. So, as someone who finds a new purpose, he decided to open a football academy for young talents. With dedication and discipline, he turned the project into a success. He wasn't just a coach, he was a mentor, an inspiration, a role model. He taught much more than skills and tactics. He spoke about resilience, overcoming challenges, courage, and love. His school became a national reference in discovering talents for the NFL. Over time, his name was once again respected and admired in the football world. But now, for something greater than his career as an athlete, his legacy as a human being, their lives took on a new rhythm. In the late afternoons, Brenda waited for him at the shop with a special bouquet. Matthew would stop by to pick her up, and they would walk hand in hand through the city streets. On Saturdays, they visited the park with Doan, who was now more than just their little dog. He was family, a silent witness to all they had been through. On the hardest days, a hug was enough. On the happiest ones, a glance. They no longer needed promises. They lived love every day, in the small gestures and the meaningful silences. In the routine filled with companionship, Matthew often said, with a smile on his lips, "Life knocked me down, but love lifted me up twice. And both times, it was you." Brenda would simply smile because she knew that everything they had faced had brought them exactly here. Now, finally, they were home. In the right place, in each other's hearts, and the world outside could continue spinning. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever separate them again. Leave a comment below and let us know what you loved most about this beautiful story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you believe in soulmates, did you know that you can discover yours through revealing drawings? This unique technique can transform the way you see your deepest connections. To learn more and uncover this fascinating mystery, click the link in the video description.
Do you love heartwarming love stories that touch your soul? Then subscribe now to our channel, Timeless Love Stories. We post new videos every week, filled with romance, twists, and happy endings that will leave you inspired. Don't miss a single chapter of this magical journey. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video is released. Come experience these unforgettable stories with us.